Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Announcing the Game, where we will always do our best to share some of our experience to help to make you a better public address announcer. And thank you for all of your continued feedback on all of our other free tutorials, and we hope that this one will be just as helpful and that you continue to share your feedback with us. I'm Tom Winnicky. I've been a public address announcer at the high school level in New York State for Miscellaneous High School for many of their sports, as well as for a number of Section 3 championships in Central New York, along with still being the public address announcer for the New York State Public High School Athletic Association championships for girls lacrosse and for football. Now, I'm primarily a public address announcer at Syracuse University of the Atlantic Coast Conference and for Colgate University of the Patriot League. And for those of you still familiar with NASPA, the National Association of Sports Public Address Announcers, I was their Public Address Announcer of the Year for 2017. Well, today, let's take a look at wrestling, and we'll go over what's applicable to any meet, whether that be for high school or for college. Now, while weight classes will differ between high school boys and high school girls, as well as for college men and for college women, the basics pretty much stay the same for us. We'll go over things that you need to take care of before you get to the meet, as well as all that you'll be expected to do once the meet begins. For any sport that we announce, wrestling included, there are common duties that we have to take care of to prepare for our match. One is to get a hold of current rosters. Now, more and more high schools post those online, and most all colleges do. Now, if you can't find them online, a quick call or email to that school will get a copy of their current roster. Now, related to rosters, you may have heard me talk about rules number 1 and number 2. Rule number 1, always get the names pronounced correctly. Rule number 2 is never break rule number 1. But how do we go about getting this information? Well, a good general rule of thumb is to avoid the head coach to get your pronunciations. This is especially true at the college level. If at all possible, respect these folks' pregame routines. Now, at the high school level, head coaches may be more than happy to help us with their names. They really appreciate this. They may not even be used to having an actual public address announcer handle their matches beyond the starting lineups. Well, again, be respectful of their pregame to-do list. And be sure to get to these people at least an hour or more ahead of time to be safe. Now, I alluded to this next point a minute ago. A great option for us to avoid having to interfere with a coach's pre-match routine is to call that school's athletics department secretary ahead of time. Now, as we said, they'll be more than happy to electronically send you their current roster if you can't find it online. Plus, they may already know these kids' names, so ask them if you can read the roster through with them. That's just a huge help. Also, if you announce multiple sports for your school, you start to develop positive relationships with these people from other schools. They start to see that you're someone that takes what they do seriously, and you do what you can to ensure that all the teams that walk into your gym are treated respectfully. Now, going back to those college matches, I've gotten into the habit of calling our opponent's SID, the sports information director, ahead of time to go over pronunciations of names and hometowns. Now, these folks are a bit surprised when I do this, but they're also impressed with my efforts. Just like for high schools, it's a great way to develop positive relationships with these people. Now, if I can't make contact with these SIDs before match day, I always want to get to a college site 75 to 90 minutes prior, so I can look for that SID on site, or maybe an athletic trainer or an assistant coach. Now, these folks may send me to the head coach for pronunciations, and that's fine, as long as they initiate that contact. Now, there will always be college head coaches who will be more than happy to help us out. But again, as a show of respect for what they have on their minds on match day, look for these other people to help you with names and hometowns. Now, some schools have even started creating video rosters. They record the players saying their own names and their own hometowns, or they may link an audio file to their lineups on their online roster. you'll see an ear icon next to each player's name. Now this is terrific. It makes our jobs a lot easier and takes a lot of the legwork out of getting pronunciations. At the high school level, your athletics director may provide scripts for you, or they may just say something like, I'd like you to say something beforehand, include something about sportsmanship, announce the national anthem, then go through each weight class. Well, if that's the case, when you do come up with something on your own, be sure to run it by this person ahead of time. Give them the option to either approve it or to make changes as they see fit. Now, going back to announcing college matches, our pre-match, in-match, and post-match announcements at this level will be provided to us by either marketing or the sports information director. It's always a good idea to ask for these scripts ahead of time so we can rehearse them before match day. Now, no matter whether it's a high school or college, whether writing our own scripts or not, I always refer to our opponents as our guests. They practice each day just like our kids do. They do the schoolwork at all hours just like our kids do. So by saying our guests, it's just a small way to throw some well-earned respect their way. Wrestling, very similar to track and field, has pretty much gone all digital. While some matches in some areas may still do everything with paper and pencil, more often than not, information is available now online in real time. The two main websites for high school and for college wrestling are trackwrestling.com and flowwrestling.com. Both of these sites directly link to what coaches need to update throughout the season, so the information is accurate. Individual results are uploaded to the site as fast as coaches or meet directors can do it. So depending on what type of match you're working, a regular season dual meet, a weekend invitational, a league or conference or state championship, it's on us as the public address announcer to find out which one of these websites are being used. Now, a suggestion I've heard more than a few times is not to access the free Wi-Fi that everybody else in the arena is trying to jump onto. That's only going to slow us down. Find out ahead of time whether you'll be expected to bring your own device, a laptop, a tablet, or something else, or whether that will be provided to you. If you need to bring your own device, will its battery last for the entire meet? Some of these meets can last all day. Will you need an extension cord to plug into an outlet? Will you need a charging device if you don't have enough cord? Also, contact the head coach or the athletic director for a high school event, or the SID for a college event, to have them give you the password to the secure Wi-Fi that other meet officials will access, not the general public. Now you're not fighting the parents and the fans and everybody else for bandwidth. Once you know what website is being used for your meet, take some time beforehand to familiarize yourself with navigating through it. You don't want to have to figure this out on the day of the match. Now, there are plenty of video tutorials out there that can walk you through these websites, so take advantage of them. If you have a good relationship with your local coach, ask them to help you through it. Now, if you're working a bigger meet, there might be a screen put up in the arena that displays a match board. It's basically what you'd see if you were on one of these websites. It shows things like who's wrestling on what mat, as well as who's on deck at each mat. Now that you have all of your rosters and pronunciations and you're familiar with the web platform being used, well, now it's time to use all this as you begin to announce the meet. But what do you do first? I always like to welcome the fans to the event first, then introduce the national anthem, followed by introducing the wrestlers in each weight class. I feel this is just the best way to go. That way, everybody is calm at the beginning and the intensity gradually builds up. If I were to introduce the wrestlers first, then go to the national anthem, I'm putting people in an awkward position. I'm getting them hyped up for the lineups, then ask them to quiet back down for the anthem, and then get them hyped up again for the first match. So by getting folks quiet for the national anthem, then gradually building things up with the lineups, and then the first match, things just seem to flow a little more naturally. So if you're looking for more information on protocols surrounding the national anthem, check out our other tutorial that deals directly with that. Your announcement would sound something like this. Welcome everyone to Orchard Park High School for today's dual meet between the Eden Raiders and our Orchard Park Quakers. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to ask that if you are able, to please rise and please remove your hats as you face our flag with your right hand over your heart to honor America with the playing of our national anthem. Now, you can get to the lineups for each weight class next, but what happens next depends on the type of wrestling meet that you're announcing. Whether it's a regular season dual or quad meet, a weekend invitational, or an end of season conference championship will determine what you say and when you say it. So let's take a look at a regular season dual or quad meet first. For wrestling, introducing lineups is a bit different than the other sports that we may have done. You're announcing the competitors in each weight class, and we have to be familiar with those weight classes. For high school meets, the NFHS has created 3 sets of weight classes for boys and 3 sets of weight classes for girls. This includes a set of 12, 13, and 14 weight classes each. The NFHS lets each state select one of these ranges of weight classes for boys and 1 set for girls. Now, a state cannot adopt all 3 ranges or switch back and forth during a season. This lets each state use the weight classes to best fit the wrestlers in their state's school districts. Now, for college matches, the NCAA has 10 weight classes for men and 10 weight classes for women. Now, a weigh-in happens before each match, and that determines who can wrestle in what weight class. A wrestler can compete in their weighed-in weight class or go up, but they cannot wrestle lighter than their weigh-in weight. Then there's a coin flip to see who has to report first before each bout begins. One is designated red and one is green. This matches color bands worn by the referee. The coin flip also allows coaches to set up matchups further down the schedule. Since one wrestler must report first for a bout, the other coach can see who is being sent out from the other team to wrestle a weight class. They can then choose the wrestler on their team that gives them the best chance to win that bout. Now, remember how we said a wrestler can wrestle at or above their weight class but can't go down? This is what's going on. We don't really need to do anything with this information. Just be aware that there's some pretty good coaching going on behind the scenes. Now, because of this, when you go down the weight classes and introduce the wrestlers, many times coaches will send out 2 wrestlers at a time. Now, if you haven't done wrestling before, this seems a bit counterintuitive. After all, somebody has to eventually wrestle at a weight, so who is it? Don't worry about this. We, remember, are just reporters. We announce what we are given. You'll probably be given a weigh-in sheet for this to read off of. So, for example, when this situation comes up, you would simply say, now wrestling at 141 pounds from Orchard Park, Tom Smith or Joe Jones, and from Eden, Bill Weathers or Sam Hopkins. The wrestlers come out to the center of the mat, shake hands, and return to their team. And you keep going through all the weight classes. Now here's something else to think about depending on your setting. There's walk-up music that you could be used while introducing your teams. Now, depending on the quality of facility's sound system, work with the DJ to adjust the volume of the music so you could still be heard. Now, if you're the one handling the music, well, that's easy. Now, something else that's done ahead of time is that the official has a draw kit. Think of a set of poker chips with the weight classes on each one. Whichever weight class gets drawn must weigh in first and wrestle first that day. The order then continues up the weight classes to the heaviest, then goes down to the lightest weight class and works their way back up again. So if 136 is drawn, that weight class goes first, followed by 142, then 148, and then so on. Now there's something else to be aware of if you're announcing a quad meet. This is where 4 teams are involved. At the beginning, Team A wrestles Team B. Team C is wrestling Team D. When those 2 matches are complete, Team A would then wrestle, say, Team C, and Team B would wrestle Team D. Now, instead of regular season dual meets with 2 teams, when things are started for the second time through at a quad meet, the first match is 1 weight class higher than was used to start the first set of bouts. So if 136 was the first weight class to wrestle in the first meet, the The second meet would begin at 142. Now, please know that the officials will tell you this, but it's also good to know this little idiosyncrasy ahead of time. Now, if you're new to wrestling and you're confused as to why someone would send out two wrestlers at a weight class during introductions, once the individual bouts are about to begin, you may actually introduce a completely different wrestler than what you announced earlier. No worries. Remember how those coaches are juggling their lineups to their advantage, many times depending on the running score of the meet. This is just an outcome of that, and it's all perfectly legal. Now remember how the referee used a coin flip to determine who has to report first to the table, and how the coaches see this and adjust their wrestlers to their advantage? Well, that's just what's going on here. Once both wrestlers have reported, you can now officially announce, now on the mat, 118 pounds, Bill Salient for the Quakers and Chris Simmons for the Raiders. When introducing the wrestlers, depending on your comfort level, you can add more information for each wrestler. Can you find something about the records for each wrestler? Was there an invitational held the previous weekend? Where did this wrestler place? Were they the invitational champion? Any information like this that you can find can enhance things. Use those sites like Flow Wrestling and TrackWrestling.com as resources. Now again, like anything else, clear this with the home coach or with the meet director ahead of time. Let's take a look at announcing a bigger league or conference championship event. Now in these, there are multiple mats set up with matches running on all of them all at the same time. They'll probably all be in the same weight class. Your announcements are a bit different. You are still announcing the entrants on each mat. Even though meets at this level are probably all digital, you can still announce who's up on each mat and which wrestlers are on deck or who are next on each mat. Now again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier, where it's up to us as the public address announcer to see what equipment is needed to access multiple weight classes and lineups online, and how to access that secure Wi-Fi. Remember, ask about getting the passwords to that secure network so you're not fighting everybody else for the free Wi-Fi. Your announcement could sound something like this. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be wrestling in the 155-pound weight class. Let's meet today's competitors. On mat 1, from Messina High School, Dan Rayome, and from Cazenovia High School, Paul Reagan. On mat 2, from Fayetteville Manlius High School, Patrick Langen, and from Oliver Ames High School, Chris Nager. Now this will continue through all the wrestlers on those mats. Now here's where you could show a little initiative in your preparation. Since this is all posted online, you can look up information on the wrestlers and add to their introductions. Maybe someone is a returning champion or is undefeated at that weight class. See if you can use Track Wrestling or Flow Wrestling or whatever platform is being used. Now, once you have that information ready, talk to the meet organizers ahead of time and see if they want you to use this type of information or not. Plus, if you do get the go-ahead, be sure to keep things in context. The focus is on the action on the mats, not on us talking. So keep announcements like this brief, so as not to delay the start of competition. So you may not have something for everyone if there's 10 or 15 mats all going at the same time. Once these bouts begin, what do you say? Well, let's look at those dual meets first. Basically, that depends on how confident you are in your knowledge of wrestling and what the meet organizers expect. Now, it's perfectly acceptable to announce the score after each period, then the final score at the end of the bout. Again, if you aren't very familiar with scoring, be sure to sit right next to the person on the scorebook. That book is official, so make sure you make good friends with that person. Now, something else you can add at the beginning of each period is that there's a coin flip. It lets a wrestler choose what position to start in. A wrestler can choose one of 3 positions, top, bottom, or neutral, and you can just announce that decision. Now, if at any time you just aren't sure, remember, less is always more. Just announce the final score of each bout. That's perfectly acceptable. Whether it's a high school or a college match, the score for each bout is determined by the point differential for each bout. If A wrestler wins his or her match by 7 points or less. It's called a regular decision and is worth 3 team points. So if you and I wrestle and you beat me by 7 or fewer points, your team is awarded 3 points. A bout won by 8 or more points is called a major decision and is worth 4. A technical fall is a win by 15 or more points and is worth 5 team points. If a match is decided by a pin or a forfeit, it's worth 6. So going back to you beating me, let's say by a score of 6-2. That's a regular decision. You won by 7 points or less, but your team is not ahead 6-2. Your team is ahead 3-0. Because your win by 7 points or less makes that a regular decision, which is worth 3 points. Your bout announcement would sound something like this. Final score of our bout at 184. Smith of the Raiders over Jones of the Quakers in a regular decision, 6-2. Partial score of our meet, Raiders over the Quakers, 3-0. Next bout on the mat will be our 187-pound match. Wrestlers should now be checking in. Now, what if you wanted to add more to your announcements without stepping on the bout? There are things that you can do. One is to announce a time left in each period, similar to soccer when you announce the last 10 seconds of the second half. You can announce 1 minute remaining, or go on to say 30 seconds remaining, or count the last 10 seconds down. Now, one note though, be sure to clear this with meet organizers ahead of time, just to be sure. Now, another thing to announce is the points as they are scored. Now, before doing this, be sure to clear this with a home coach for a dual meet or a meet director for a bigger meet. Be sure they're okay with you doing this. But more importantly here, you have to be absolutely sure of the referee's signals and who was awarded what points. Also, be sure that you're seated right next to the official scorebook so you can confirm anything before announcing it. Points in a wrestling match can come fast and furious, so be sure that you're on your toes and be absolutely sure of those signals. The last thing we want to do is to be incorrect about somebody awarded points. Now, if a meet has video capabilities, another thing to watch for are coaches' challenges. If a coach sees a call that they disagree with, they can instantly challenge it. They do this by tossing a brick. Now, it's not a real brick, but a foam one. It's a brick-shaped object that's either red or green to match their team and the referee's armband that we mentioned earlier. They toss that brick onto the mat during the bout. The bout instantly stops. The coach tells the referee what they're challenging, and the official checks the video review. Once a decision is made, the referee reports that to the table where the scorebook is. And that's why you need to be sitting right next to the scorebook. Listen to the referee and announce the decision exactly as they report it to the table. Now let's circle back to those larger meets with action going on multiple mats at the same time. How do we handle that? Well, once the action starts, matches, of course, will finish at different times. The next question is, when do you announce the results? The answer lies in a conversation that you had with the meet directors beforehand. Do they want the results right after each bout, then call the next bout to the mat while the other matches haven't finished? Or do they want to wait until all bouts are finished to read off those individual results? It's important to remember that we are part of a team working together to create a smooth running event. In this example, wrestling. Our part is to be as prepared as possible. It's someone else's role to use our prep and our knowledge to help create that smooth running event. So whatever is decided regarding when to announce results, we go with it, then announce what round that meet is moving to and who the next wrestlers are and what mat they're on. Some meets that are already all digital may not need us to do this. Mat assignments may all be online, and wrestlers and coaches may have been instructed to know where to be and when to be there. Now, this probably will be displayed in the arena. Now, if a wrestler isn't at their assigned mat on time, the official may come to us and ask us to make a first call or a second call for that wrestler. Again, we go off the official telling us to make this announcement. We never do this on our own. Now, one thing about these bigger wrestling meets, when a wrestler loses their first bout, they're not eliminated. There's something called a Wrestleback. This is basically a loser's bracket or a second chance bracket. Think of the regular bracket that goes off to the right, and a Wrestleback is the bracket that goes off to the left. When a wrestler loses a bout in a certain round, they move to the Wrestleback. They wrestle someone else that lost in that round. If they win, they move up in the Wrestleback. When they lose in the Wrestleback, then they're officially eliminated. Both brackets, those that keep winning and for the Wrestleback, they continue. Eventually, that bracket that goes off to the right, the winner's bracket, will end up with two wrestlers vying for the championship. The two that they beat to get to the finals move to the Wrestleback, and they wrestle each other for third place. This format just continues to fill in the remaining places, the top 6 or top 8 or whatever's been set up for this meet. For us, as the public address announcer, once things get to the finals, or depending on the meet organizer, for the third place or the fifth place bouts, it's a good idea to have information on these wrestlers that you can use to reintroduce them. Information like their name, school, coaches, career record, conference or national rankings are great things to include. Also look for things like prior accomplishments. Are they a returning champion? If they're undefeated in their weight class, that's something else you can add. Are they going for a milestone career win? Maybe their 50th career win or their 100th career win. In general, when working bigger meets with multiple mats going at once, think of ourselves as traffic cops. There may be less match-by-match updates that you do for a dual meet or a quad meet. Your announcements direct people to action on different mats. Maybe the returning champion is in action on mat 6, or a wrestler on mat 7 is undefeated this season, things like that. Remember that these meets may have a board displaying this information already. You just refocus people's attention on these specific matches. The next thought goes back to that conversation you had with the meet directors ahead of time. Now, I hope you're seeing how important this communication is for us. Find out if it's okay for you to announce information during action. Maybe there's an upset brewing on mat 2, or a senior class wrestler is closing in on making the finals for the first time after appearing in this championship meet since their freshman year. Now, in all of our other tutorials, I talk about saying what's needed to be said and then get out of the way of the game. Things like not talking when the offense breaks the huddle in football, or not talking when the free throw shooter has the ball in basketball. Now, in wrestling, it can be perfectly fine at a big tournament to talk while the bouts are in progress. Any meet like this may have somebody called a walking announcer or a free announcer. These folks are set up with wireless mics and they move from mat to mat giving updates to the crowd. Now, since there's action going on at the same time on multiple mats, these people are important. They keep everyone in the crowd focused and informed. Now, these are separate than what we would do to our duties sitting at the table announcing information. If you're just getting started announcing high school or college wrestling, stick to the basics. Things like names, pronounced correctly. Remember rules number 1 and rules number 2. Who is in action on the mat and in what weight class, as well as the results at the end of each period and the end of each bout, plus a running score of the event. Now, a pet peeve I've heard more than once when talking to folks in the wrestling world was to please use the correct terminology. The main one I heard was that it's a period. It's not a round. There are 3 periods in a bout. If you're calling points scored as they happen, be very sure that you know what a reversal is or what an escape is and so on. Like any other sport that we announce, the more that we do, the better we get. At first, stick to the basics. As we said, lineups, both pre and post check-in for each weight class, and the score at the conclusion of each period and at each bout. When you're comfortable with how points are scored and accompanied referee signals, and you're sitting right next to that official scorebook, you can think about adding this to any future competitions you do. Get comfortable with Track Wrestling and FlowWrestling.com. Know your way around these websites so when you do work an event using one of these platforms, you can access information in a timely manner to use for your announcements. Above all, respect the sport, the wrestlers, and the coaches that are involved. Be sure that however much or how little you end up announcing, that it's timely and that it's accurate. Well, we hope you found this information helpful and that it made you a bit more comfortable about announcing high school or college wrestling. If you're watching us on YouTube, please sign in and leave us some constructive comments. We're always looking for feedback as we look to develop more and produce more of these free tutorials. Or you can shoot me an email to my address here on the screen. Well, thanks for tuning in once again and watching another episode of Announcing the Game. I'm Tom Winicki, and I look forward to hearing you on the mic.